Θα καλέσουμε λοιπόν τώρα στο βήμα μία εξαίρετη επιστήμονα. Ελπίζω όλοι να έχετε ξεσκονίσει τις ξένες γλώσσες. Η δόκτωρ Τέσσα Χόφμαν, λοιπόν, καθηγήτρια μέχρι το 2015 στο Πανεπιστήμιο Φράιερ του Βερολίνου και επίτιμη καθηγήτρια στο Πανεπιστήμιο, θα με συγχωρήσετε, Θράκια Αχαριάν του Ερεβάν. Είναι κοινωνιολόγος, συγγραφέας και ανεξάρτητη μελετήτρια γενοκτονιών με εξειδίκευση στις Οθωμανικές γενοκτονίες. Μέλος της Εταιρείας για τους Απειλούμενους Πληθυσμούς, πρόεδρος της Ομάδας Εργασίας Επιβεβαίωση ενάντια στη γενοκτονία, συμμετέχει ενεργά στη διεθνή πρωτοβουλία μιλώντας με μια φωνή για την αναγνώριση της αρμενικής, αραμαϊκής και ελληνικής γενοκτονίας. Έχει γράψει πάνω από μία δεκάδα βιβλίων για την αρμενική ιστορία και τον πολιτισμό. Είναι εκδότρια της τουρκικής έκδοσης της αρχικά γερμανικής συλλογής μονογραφίες για τη γενοκτονία των χριστιανών κατά τη διάρκεια της τελευταίας δεκαετίας της Οθωμανικής κυριαρχίας. Έχει έρθει στο βήμα και βέβαια πρέπει να σας πω ότι όλους τους ανοίγει και κλείνει γιατί έχω ακόμα το μικρόφωνο ανοιχτό. Όλους τους άξιους επιστήμονες, μετά από λίγο καιρό τους κάνουμε Έλληνες, διότι η δόκτωρ Χόφμαν είναι... Κυρία Βαλάτα, μην κλείνετε το κουμπί, κλείνει επειδή είναι το μικρόφωνο. Όλους τους, λοιπόν, είναι παντρεμένοι και με Έλληνα, οπότε τη θεωρούμε και Ελληνίδα. Δόκτωρ Χόφμαν.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. It's a very important experience because mostly when dealing with the issues of what I call a genocide, not a catastrophe, there, for example, in Germany, there would be Pontus Greek associations. I'm very happy today to come into personal contact with representatives of the...
Συγγνώμη, υπάρχει ταυτόχρονη μετάφραση.
Αλλάξτε κανάλι.
Ακουστικά, ακουστικά.
Αλλάξτε κανάλι.
Κανάλι 2 είναι τα ελληνικά.
Ένα λεπτό παρακαλώ.
Στο κανάλι 2.
Στο κανάλι 2, για όσους πήραν ακουστικά. Όσοι δεν είχαν ταυτότητα, δεν μπορούμε να κάνουμε τίποτα, διότι πρέπει να υπάρχει μία εγγύηση. Και παρακαλώ, όσοι δεν έχουν, ας μην το κάνουν θέμα. Έξω είναι τα, όποιος παρέλειψε ίσως να πάρει, αλλά πρέπει να έχει μία ταυτότητα, ένα δίπλωμα, ένα κάτι για να το αφήσει εκεί να το... Εντάξει, ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ. You may continue.
Yes, I was mentioning that usually I was in contact with Pontus Greek associations, in particular in Germany. This is my first time to meet with Migrasiatis, and so I'm very thankful for that experience. I start with an introduction into the demographic specifics of the Ottoman Empire. The Memalik Osmaniye, or the Grand Sultanate of the Ottomans, as the Ottoman Empire officially called itself, covered almost 4 million square kilometers. In the 16th century, during its greatest expansion, it included the entire Balkan Peninsula as far as Budapest, the northern Black Sea coast, parts of Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, Tunisia, and Algiers. The empire had arisen through successive conquests and subjugations and was named after its ruling dynasty. For over 600 years, from 1219 to 1922, the Ottomans provided the heads of state and since 1517 also the spiritual head of the Sunni Muslims, the Caliph. At the beginning of the 20th century, more than 38 million people settled in this multi-religious and multi-ethnic feudal state. The majority, over 21 million, lived in Asia Minor. More than a third of these, up to 6 million, were indigenous Christians, Armenians, Greek Orthodox, and various denominations of Syriacs. In order to better understand the problems of the Ottoman Empire, we must remember that today's understanding of ethnicities and nations cannot be transferred to the conditions in the Ottoman Empire or its predecessor state. Until 1400, the Byzantines referred exclusively to themselves as Romans, Romei, then increasingly as Hellenes. But until the 20th century, the Greek terms Romios, Roman, or the plural Romyi prevailed. In Turkish, Greek Orthodox Christians from and in Turkey are still today referred to as Romans. Not only did the Byzantines see themselves as successors of the Roman Empire, but they were the Roman Empire par excellence. For a long time, this term included all Orthodox Christians of Byzantine adherence, including Orthodox Bulgarians and Albanians. With an estimated overall population of up to 2,700,000, the Romyi were the largest denomination of indigenous Ottoman Christians. On the Byzantine throne sat also rulers of Syro-Aramaic and Armenian descent, as far as they confessed to the orthodoxy of Byzantine coinage. This dominance of the religiously defined collective identity continued in Ottoman times. When a French-style state census was introduced in 1876, it only covered religious affiliations. That is, on the one hand, the non-Muslims, on the other, the Muslims, whose Ottoman self-understanding the American historian Bernard Lewis expressed as follows, quotation, "In the imperial society of the Ottomans, the ethnic term Turk was little used, and then chiefly in a rather derogatory sense to designate the Turkoman nomads or later the ignorant and uncouth Turkish-speaking peasants of the Anatolian villages," end quote. Only the non-Muslims were statistically divided into Jews, Armenian Apostolic Christians, and Greek Orthodox Christians. According to Islamic traditional law, these denominations were regarded as millet, that is, as faith or church nations. At the insistence of France and Great Britain, a Catholic and a Protestant millet were added in the 19th century. The chief rabbi and the Christian patriarchs resident in Constantinople were the official representatives of their communities vis-à-vis the Ottoman state, which took the right to confirm the heads of the religious nations in their office or not. Under Ottoman Muslim rule, the descendants of the Byzantines and all other non-Muslims were regarded as herds under protections, that is, as raya or dhimmi. These non-Muslim protectees were legally subordinated to the Muslims. Before Islamic courts, their statements had no probative force. Non-Muslims were not allowed to possess or carry weapons or to ride a horse. Only Muslims were admitted to the civil service, which is why 66 of 76 heads of government or grand viziers were converted in the period of 1453 to 1640. From the mid of the 16th century to the mid of the 19th century, non-Muslims paid a poll tax, or called jizya in Arabic, which was subsequently paid as a tax for exemption from military service. Since the loyalty of non-Muslims was doubted, they were excluded from military service until 1908. If non-Muslims resisted their oppression by force of arms or fought for their independence, Ottoman rulers made use of their alleged right of punishment. Even in the 19th century, this still included jihadist traditions. This meant that adult men were massacred, women and children enslaved. When the Ionian island of Chios joined the Greek fight for independence, the Sultan sent a punitive expedition. In 1822, slaughtering a total of 23,000 people and selling 47,000 Chiotes at the slave markets of Smyrna and Cairo. Full stop. That is also a place of a crime scene. Chios rebellion against Ottoman rule was as unacceptable as Greek uprisings on Crete, where in 1866 residents who had fled to the monastery of Arcadio for asylum were blown up. Several factors determined the Ottoman road to a state crime against the indigenous Christians of Armenia, Asia Minor and Mesopotamia. I name here the four, in my view, main factors. First, military defeat and the successful struggle for independence in South Europe caused considerable territorial losses in Europe and Africa. Second, since 1578, the Ottoman Empire led war against Russia during 4 centuries. With the exception of the Crimea War, they were defeated in all 11 wars. The victorious Russians were also perceived as the protectors of the Orthodox Christians. Third factor, Until the 19th century, non-Muslims were discriminated in legal and civic aspects, as already mentioned. Nevertheless, economically, they were leading. Crafts, commerce, and industries were in the hands of Jews, Armenians, and in particular the Romye. They could occupy these areas since the Muslim faithful were prohibited to take interest rates. The subsequent imbalance of political and economic power resembled the relation of medieval Christian rulers in Europe towards their Jewish creditors. With the adoption of European nationalist concepts, Ottoman Muslims found that this state of affairs had to be changed. Under the slogan of Islamization of the Ottoman economy, organized boycotts and discrimination against Christians were conducted that hit not only Greek and Armenian traders and entrepreneurs, but also farmers. And the fourth or last factor, the change of the ethno-religious composition of the Ottoman population. Starting with the late 18th century, the statistic relation between Muslims and non-Muslims in the Ottoman Empire changed drastically. It is estimated that 5 to 7 million Muslims immigrated into the Ottoman Empire. Most fled as refugees from the advancing Russian Empire, followed by those who arrived from the Balkans. Most were highly traumatized by violence due to ethno-religious hate and reacted correspondingly with hate. The percentage of Muslims from the Ottoman borderlands or refugees from the North Caucasus was particularly high among the genocide perpetrators of the First World War. The demographic politics and subsequent measures, such as dispersion of coherent ethno-religious agglomerations by massacres and deportation, have been rightly paraphrased by scholar Fuad Dündar as a crime of numbers. After the Chauvinist Committee for Union and Progress, also called Ittihadists, had overthrown in 1908 the reactionary Sultan Abdülhamid II by a military coup d'etat, the new rulers developed the idea to stabilize the collapsing and dissolving empire. So I repeat that last sentence. After the Chauvinist Committee for Union and Progress, also called Ittihadist, had overthrown in 1908 the reactionary Sultan Abdülhamid by a military coup d'etat, the new rulers developed the idea to stabilize the collapsing and dissolving empire by homogenization, or as it was paraphrased at the time, by Islamization. This catchword related also to commerce and entrepreneurship, which were predominantly exerted by non-Muslims, as already mentioned. The Ittihadist or CUP leaders, however, expanded Muslim predominance to the Ottoman economy. The first and main victims of the boycotts and economic repressions that were intended to drive non-Muslim traders and industrialists into bankruptcy, suicide, or exile were the Greek Orthodox Christians. Subsequently, the Romlar were also the first to experience deportation, death marches, and dispersion among Muslim majority populations. Deportations were first implemented during the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 13 in Eastern Thrace, where the regime experimented with two types of expulsions. While cross-border expulsions into adjacent Greece resulted in the return of Ottoman Greeks after the war, deportations into central Anatolia with death rates of near to 50% proved as a more effective means of destruction and were subsequently largely applied in following years. Until summer 1914, about 350,000 Greeks were expelled or massacred en lieu in Eastern Thrace alone. Of these, 119,000 were deported to central Anatolia, where 46,000 died from diseases or during forced labor. The Balkan Wars definitely turned the attitude of Ottoman statesmen. Their perception of Christians, and in particular of Greek Orthodox Ottomans, was now exclusively determined by revenge and mistrust. In her memoirs published in 1926, the Turkish writer and nationalist activist Halide Edip Adiba described how the nationalist Ottoman elite had been gripped by the feeling, quotation, that the Turks had to exterminate others in order to prevent being exterminated themselves. Preventive destruction of designated target groups is a general feature of the genocidal mind and psyche. Preventive elimination had been envisioned in the rhetoric of the Young Turks as early as 1910, but since the Balkan Wars, it expressed itself increasingly in criminal acts. In May 1914, and half a year before the Ottoman entry into the World War, the Ittihadist government decided to cleanse the Aegean and Marmara littorals from their Greek inhabitants. Already in mid-July 1914, Prime Minister Said Halim informed the German ambassador about the, quotation, total removal of the Greek population from the littoral of Asia Minor, end quote. At this stage, the Ottoman Greeks were considered enemies within, in dehumanizing speech, internal tumors. The second dragoman of the German ambassador, Dr. Herbert Schwörbel, who in summer 1915 traveled twice in official mission to Western Anatolia, found Greek women, children, and old people under precarious conditions in concentration camps along the Soma-Pandarma railways. They were deportees from the Marmara coast, entirely left to themselves without food and accommodation. Schwörbel concluded, quotation, with the exception of Iverly and Smyrna with its environs, the entire Greek civilization, which flourished until recently at the west coast of Asia Minor, is destroyed, end quote. The deportations of Rumlas continued throughout the Great War, accompanied by massacres, mass rapes, forced labor, confiscation and plunder of properties. The focus was now on the Pontus region and adjacent Bithynia and Cappadocia. After its capitulation of the 30th October 1918, the Ottoman Empire was at least formally under the military control of the victorious Entente states. Three of them, Russia, France and Great Britain, had in a joint note of the 24th of May 1915 urged the Ottoman war regime to end its persecution of the Armenian population, announcing at the same time that after the war they would hold all members of the Ottoman government responsible for their, quotation, crime against humanity and civilization. After the war, but in the same spirit of punitive justice, the British High Commission at Constantinople appointed, at the first meeting of its Armenian Greek section, the following 5 work subdivisions. First, Turkish offenders. Second, relief. Third, land and property, that means repatriation and restitution of property. Fourth, Islamized Christians and Christians in Turkish hands, and finally Greeks and Armenians in Turkish prisons. To say the least, none of these missions could be fully accomplished during the period of 1919 to 22. First of all, the Ottoman Empire at that time was a failing state whose civilian authorities were either no longer functional or venal and corrupt, as an Allied commission found in 1921. So I'm reminded that I'm running out of time, and for that reason I'm jumping to conclusions and to my summary. I was told you will get all the presentations in full text, so you have the opportunity to read that, what you are missing just now. What is genocide? Scholars of genocide and history deliver diverse answers, but genocide, first of all, is a crime, the ultimate crime. Therefore, we have to consider the one and only internationally binding legal definition as given by Raphael Lemkin, who became the initiator of the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. For Lemkin, the decisive element of genocide is not physical destruction or massive killings, but rather, quotation, a coordinated plan of different actions aiming at the destruction of essential foundations of the life of national groups, with the aim of annihilating the groups themselves. Lemkin's definition bases largely on the examples of genocide committed during the world wars of the 20th century, that is, the Ottoman genocide against indigenous Christians and the Nazi destruction of European Jewry during the Second World War. Against the background of massive flight and migration of war and civic war, it is difficult to offer laudable figures. In recent research, The total of Greek Orthodox victims killed during the last decade of Ottoman rule is estimated to be as high as 900,000 or even more than 1 million, considering the many casualties that occurred during the expulsion or the first months after their arrival in destitute Greece, where many of the Mikrasiates succumbed to hardships, diseases and despair. With their bilateral treaty, Greece and Turkey sealed the mutual forced expatriation and eviction of their religious minorities in January 1923. As a Swiss historian and scholar of Turkish studies, Hans-Lukas Tieser, concluded, with the multilateral Lausanne Peace Treaty of July 1923, the victorious allies sanctified the, quotation, expulsion and liquidation of millions of people in favor of a dubious national renewal which a dominant elite had conducted at the expense of non-Muslim Ottomans, quotation. There was no more talk of returning Armenian refugees and creating justice. The treaty also provided for Greek-Turkish large-scale first-time population transfer, which legalized an already largely completed ethnic cleansing. With regard to the talks on Kurdish, Armenian and Greek minorities in his country, Dr. Riza Nur, the Secretary General of the Turkish Conference delegation, noted that, quotation, these foreign elements are a plague and microbes, end quote. Compared with the genocide against the Ottoman Armenians as the other large in numbers Christian ethnicity that was destroyed, we find commonalities more than differences. All key elements of the Armenian case, such as eliticide, forced labor, massacres, deportations, and the transfer of children, took place in the Greek case as well, often prior to the Armenian genocide. The differences exist rather in temporal dimensions than in the applied methods. The destruction of 1.5 million Armenians took only 19 months, while the destruction of the Ottoman Greeks occurred regionally and cumulatively over a span of a decade. This long duration explains, perhaps by the fact that the Hellenic neutrality during the World War until 1917 prevented nationwide deportations of Ottoman Greeks. Together with its cumulative nature, the regionalization of genocidal events is a characteristic feature of the genocide against the Ottoman Greeks before and during the World War. The International Association of Genocide Scholars, as the largest academic union, issued in December 2007 a resolution that evaluated the destruction of the Ottoman Greeks as genocide. In the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, deportation is enlisted among the 11 crimes against humanity, together with murder, extermination, enslavement, imprisonment, rape, sexual slavery, and forced prostitution, and persecution against an identifiable collectivity on religious, national, and ethnic grounds, as given in Article 7 of the statute. All these crimes were event closed, documented in the case of the Ottoman Greeks. In addition to the books enlisted here, I would like to point out to some books, 4 books I brought with me. In these books I participated either as co-editor, co-author, or as peer reviewer And so whoever is interested in that may have a look into these books. I leave one as a gift to the organizers. Thank you.